Hey guys, thanks for checking out episode 8 of 2-Player Reviews. It seems like just yesterday we were recording episode 7.
If that long.
Yeah, really. Today we're here to talk about a game on the Super Nintendo that is a 2-player beat-em-up. It's a side-scroller, and we found that with the 2-player reviews, the games we actually get to play together are the most fun.
They are really fun, and especially this game, because I don't even know if I call it a beat 'em up. It's more of like a hack and slash, I think I would call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a beat 'em up, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And that game, of course, that we are talking about it's a little obscure.
Yeah.
Maybe people talk about it. Legend. The Super Nintendo, my personal favorite. No, actually, I had not heard of it until we played to review it, and P1 found this gem. Where'd you find this?
A friend of mine, Jason Petrie, I work with, he went home to his father's house, and his father had it there, and he just gave it to me.
That is a steal, my friend.
Yeah, anytime you get a game is awesome. To get a complete in-box Super Nintendo game and have it be a good game, mind-blowing. So thank you. If you're watching, Jay, thank you very much again.
That is pretty rare. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reviewing it, and anybody who can wield a sword with a handle that short, you gotta be pretty buff.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, let's take a look.
Let's get into it.
Legend is a 2-player beat-em-up on the Super Nintendo developed by Arcade Zone.
Arcade Zone? That sure sounds like a company that has done nothing else.
That's not true. They did both Nightmare Busters and Iron Commando, also on the SNES.
So pretty much exactly what I said, nothing else.
You never know, both of those games might be runaway smash hits.
You might be right, but we're not here to talk about those games. So let's get into the story for Legend.
There's a wall of scrolling text at the start of the game to let you know why you're fighting. However, like most beat-em-ups, the storyline takes a backseat to the gameplay. It roughly boils down to there is an evildoer causing chaos in the land, and it's up to the two brothers with the hardest jawlines to head out and destroy the evil plaguing the countryside. Have you noticed how closely these guys resemble us?
What are you talking about?
That one there. He looks just like you.
Close, but you're a little delusional, I think. Now, while playing the game, we had very little immersing us in terms of story. But, as we said earlier, it didn't bother us in the least, because the gameplay is really what matters with this genre. And that was more than entertaining enough to hold our interest. So let's get into that.
The game starts without the choice of playable characters, rather just giving you only 2 available. And saying that there are even 2 available is a stretch, because each are almost identical to one another. With the exception of the color of the sprite and the fact that they each have a different weapon, they do exactly the same attacks for exactly the same damage. Each character also has exactly the same ranged attack, which drains some health when used, but we both forgot about it very early on. Also, there are bombs that you collect throughout the level as well, and while they do help clearing the screen, it would have been nice if the 2 characters each had their own special attacks for them.
So, overall the gameplay mechanics are pretty bland, but they do get the job done, and there's nothing that really fails enough to keep you from having some fun. You are given a generous hit radius with your attacks, and until the cave level, you shouldn't have much trouble keeping up with the enemy waves with even the slightest strategy in use. So, in fact, actually, now that I think about it, most enemies throughout the game were fun to take down, with the exception of the aforementioned cave area. The caveman that inhabits that level will cause many headaches for those making their way through for the first time.
Seriously, before we go on, we cannot express how much of a pain in the ass that cave stage really was. Up to that point, the game had a nice, easy learning curve, and then BAM! All of a sudden, we're getting curb stomped as if we're an extra in American History X.
One other annoying feature were the bats and dogs that you'll encounter in every level. These enemies were put into the game to drop health replenishing items when you kill them. So essentially they are used to help you build up health before some big events. However, the bats and dogs themselves can also hurt you, and they have much smaller hitboxes than every other enemy and can sometimes be more of a headache than the normal enemies. So be ready for that.
One question we do have is whether or not the gold you pick up along the way is actually used for anything. When we first saw the coins laying on the ground, it was hard to resist trying to steal it all up for yourself with the thought that you were going to be able to buy some great gear later on. But we couldn't find any use for it whatsoever. We had to keep picking it up though, because that's just how we are. So if anyone out there knows what it's for, please let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, and so as stated before, there wasn't really anything that frustrating in terms of just getting through the game. The enemies weren't that difficult, and they were all pretty generic. And the fact that we couldn't hit each other definitely made it a little more relaxing. Throw in the fact that it's not very long, and you have yourself a pretty mediocre title that will easily eat up a couple of hours if you're in the mood. But enough about the gameplay mechanics, let's get into the graphics.
Right from the start, you can see that Legend has some pretty standout graphics. Although not the best for the system, the graphics are certainly far from the worst. Each sprite is quite large and detailed nicely, so you'll never have any trouble telling each one apart from one another, with the exception of when the action gets a little too ramped up and the screen goes a little twitchy. This is especially prevalent in the rainy stage, which you'll understand immediately if you give it a shot.
The enemies are all large and detailed as well, but don't expect too many different kinds. You'll find plenty of palette swaps throughout the game, but the monsters are all cool enough looking that you'll forgive it.
Aside from the sprites, there are also some really nice backgrounds and foregrounds. This game has no shortage of nice layers in terms of graphics. If only they could have spent as much time on the soundtrack for the game. But I'll let my audiophile brother get into that.
Overall, the soundtrack wasn't terrible, but much like the rest of the game, it isn't anything amazing either. Most of the songs aren't too repetitive, but there aren't enough good ones to suggest going out and buying the soundtrack or anything. There are a few hits, and none of them will make your ears bleed though, so I guess we can't complain too much.
The sound effects suffer the same fate. Nothing stands out, and the sound of hitting an enemy with your giant weapon should have a rewarding thud or slash sound, but it just falls flat, sadly. All of this adds up to a fun game that you could easily stream while talking over the sound and no one would mind.
You did forget to mention the map.
Oh, you mean that lovely little item that guides us overall the game?
Was that your segue for our overall segment? Worst segue ever. overall, it's not a bad little gem for the SNES, which houses a large plethora of much better beat-em-ups. But the game contained great graphics and a fairly entertaining gameplay style that won't stand out for any hardcore fan of the genre, but if you're looking for something a little different, maybe a little obscure, give it a shot if you find it for the right price.
According to a handy collection charting app I have on my phone, this game can run you about $50 loose. Although we both had a blast playing through, and with 2 difficulty levels there is some replayability, I'm not certain to be worth that price tag. Luckily, I got my copy complete in box from a dear friend at work.
So thanks everyone for watching. And if you missed it, check out our last 2-player review where we talked about the Wii U launch title, Zombie U.
And if you're in the mood for some more beat-em-up action, don't be afraid to click the link to the Mystery Clubber. His reviews are both entertaining and informative.